Tom Clark's Main Event is a Boink Studios production. Follow us on Twitter at Boink Studios and check out our Facebook page where you can see all of our projects, past, present, and future. And now, on with the show.
This is Daddy's show. Step off.
Hey, what is up? Welcome to the program, folks. Thank you for tuning in. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tom Clark, and you are listening to Tom Clark's Main Event. This is episode number 39 of the podcast. That's right, folks, quickly approaching number 40, the big 40. Do you remember 40? Have you hit 40? Don't ask me if I have. You're only going to depress me. But anyway, for those of you who are joining us today for the very first time, we say welcome aboard. For those of you coming back for repeat visit, we say, hey, thanks for tuning back into us. And for all of those involved, we extend to you, as always, the customary laurel and hearty handshake. Thanks for listening. Thanks for reading. Thanks for supporting. And hey, thanks for always being there, Doc. So, as we said before, episode number 39, this is my show. I'm Tom. This is what we do. This is what we call the main event. Hope everyone out there is doing pretty good today. We are fastly approaching not only episode number 40, but also Christmas time, the Yuletide season. Happy Hanukkah to you. Merry Kwanzaa. I don't know what that is. It Happy Kwanzaa? Merry Kwanzaa? I don't know. Happy Christmas to you. That's right, folks. Santa's on his way. Frosty the Snowman has come to life again, and he's making all the little kids laugh. I have mixed feelings on the Frosty the Snowman cartoon. I think the kids are thieves. They stole the magical hat from the magician who was just trying to eke out a meager living, an honest living. Making kids like those laugh and have fun and enjoy their birthdays. But no, these children stole the hat, and when prompted, when asked politely by the magician to please return the hat so that I may continue to try to eke out a meager wage and earn my living, they refused because it was more important to them to bring a gigantic pile of snow to life than to help this man feed his family. He was married with 6 kids, all of whom starved to death in the desolate winter of Frosty the Snowman. I don't know if any of that really happened, but talk about a part 2, right? Where you get to see, everything from the magician's point of view. Not so squeaky clean now, is it? Not so happy fun time, right? It's actually a lot, more bitter and a little bit darker than you could have imagined. There's nothing like opening up a pro wrestling show with stories of animation and jolly Christmas time. Is it? There's nothing like it. Okay, man, why don't we just go ahead and get involved in this? Just go ahead and mix this thing up and go ahead and get going, shall we? You didn't tune in to listen about Frost the Snowman, did you? You tuned in to hear my very entertaining, very awesome, very holy crap, it's Tom voice. That's me, man. Like I said, this is my show. This is the main event. And the main event this time around, and this is a good one, the main event this time around is old school. Because, brother, if you know me, you know that I am old school. It's a term that's been used and overused. It's become cliche. It's become a bit ridiculous in how we describe wrestlers. It's become a bit ridiculous in how we use it in our everyday vernacular. In the pro wrestling world, old school means a lot of things. In everyday vernacular and everyday speak, it can mean any number of silly references. But for the world of professional wrestling, old school is exactly that. It's the old days, the good old days of pro wrestling, the territory days, the days that yours truly grew up in. That's right, man. I've been a pro wrestling fan since before I could walk. In the womb, I'm a fan, okay? Love the business then, love it now. If I could say during the course of my lifetime that I've been a major fan of one company, it would have to be the assortment of companies that was known as the National Wrestling Alliance. And that's, for me, where old school began. I was a huge fan, still am. But I stumbled across the NWA because it's what my mom and dad watched. My dad was a huge pro wrestling fan. And my mom watched as well. She got into it. I remember my mom screaming at the TV when Ric Flair would cheat to win. Those were the days. I grew up hating Flair because I was supposed to, because that was part and parcel of being a pro wrestling fan and, being worked by the heels, because the heels are extraordinarily good at doing what they do. And Ric Flair was the best of all time. In my humble opinion, I hear, debates being made and arguments being made and discussions being had all across the world in favor of Shawn Michaels, in favor of other people. And I understand where a lot of that comes from. But honestly, if I'm being straight with you, for me, there's been none bigger, none better, none brighter at all than the man himself, the Nature Boy Ric Flair. And no better wrestling company, in my opinion. There was a lot of great territories back in the day. And as I said, that's what I was drawn to. That's what my dad watched. And we live down south, of course. We're in the southern part of the United States here. And down south, we, it's Jim Crockett country. I've said it many times here on the show, and it's absolutely true. It's still Crockett country, by the way. That's why every time you go to local events in Charlotte, Greensboro, Greenville, and like for Monday Night Raw, and the building is filling up, all it takes is one person to say woo, and suddenly it rings out all over the building. That's never not going to happen. I feel like, 20 years after Rick has passed on from this life, you're still going to find that, especially down south, because this is where, in my opinion, this is where pro wrestling, to me, had its best moments and had its best days, was in the South. And it's all due respect to Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's all due respect to Texas. It's all due respect to New York, and everywhere in between. But for me, the Carolinas, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida, up and down this region, to me, this is the absolute best that the business has ever seen. The best storytelling. The best storytellers. Let's just be honest about it, man. Not only Rick, but Dusty. I mean, you get Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes. The ultimate pro wrestling feud of all time. It had everything you could possibly imagine. It was the archetype of every pro wrestling feud that followed, in my humble opinion. Because, like I said, it had everything. It had the rich man versus poor man aspect. It had material things versus, I'm just trying to earn a living for my family. And it had all of these different aspects wound into a great package of two guys that could talk a streak. I mean, Dusty could talk you into the building. Dusty could sell tickets by cutting a promo, which any top guy can do or should be able to do. I think it's a lost art these days, being able to talk someone into the building. Dusty had that, and then some. Of course, we lost the Great American Dream this year, and it's still kind of staying with me. In the discussion of old school, it's hard to not talk about Dusty, at least number one, number two, in front of or right behind Rick, because to me that's old school. And as I've divulged on the program before, my dad, the aforementioned pro wrestling fan, died at a very young age. He was 24. He wasn't far from being 25. And he passed away 6 days before my 5th birthday. I'm 42 now, and it's something that still stays with me to this day. I have a 7-year-old who I loved to death. He's the best thing. Here's the thing about it is that pro wrestling gets passed down from father to son. It's kind of like, Major League Baseball. NFL, I guess, in a lot of ways also. But just the love of the sport, the love of the business is passed down. My kid's a wrestling fan because I am. I'm a wrestling fan because my dad was. I mean, that was the initial hook. But once you get in it and you see the beauty of it, and as I've said before many, many times, I believe pro wrestling is the one true American art form. It is American theater, in my opinion. It is what our contribution is. It's what our contribution is not only to and I don't want to say sports entertainment, but entertainment in general, because I guess what you would think of kabuki theater for Japan. In my opinion, that's what it is for us. It's a very uniquely American idea, in my opinion, that you have two guys who have a problem and they try to resolve that conflict between four posts and ropes. And they say, listen, I got a problem with you, got a problem with me, let's settle it like men. And that's a very uniquely American concept. I'm not saying it doesn't work in other countries. I'm not saying other countries can't give you some fantastic wrestling. They do, obviously. New Japan, Lucha Underground, the AAA guys, and the Wrestling Mexico, and all over the world. I'm not suggesting that it doesn't exist. Don't misunderstand me here. But for me, in my opinion, it's always been a very uniquely American concept. The idea of let's settle our problem with our fists. And that may sound brutish. It may sound brutal. It may sound a little bit over the top, and it might sound like a lot of macho flexing. But I think it's a very normal, very healthy thing to want to, get your aggression out. And I'm not suggesting steel chairs and flaming tables and barbed wire and buckets of blood. I'm not saying that. That's taking it a bit far, in my opinion. But I think it's a healthy thing to just get your problems out in the open and try to sell it like men. Now, it takes it a bit far when you talk about the Horseman teaming up on Dusty Rhodes in a parking lot and breaking his hand. That's a bit much. But, like I said before, my kid's 7. He's not being taught to solve your problems with your fists. He's in Taekwondo. He's a blue belt, actually, in Taekwondo. And he's being taught that you use physical conflict, you use physical answers to problems when there's no last resort. And I've taught him, if I've taught him anything, I've taught him one thing. Everybody gets one, okay? And you walk away. If that person pursues you, you turn around, you defend yourself. And I'm a firm believer in that. I don't believe in picking fights. I don't believe in starting fights. But I do believe when someone's coming at you, you have the ability and you have the right to defend yourself. And at his core, in my opinion, the best baby faces of the business have the same belief system as characters. Say, look, I didn't come here to start a fight, but if you want to start it, I'm more than happy to finish it. And therein lies, like we said, the macho speak, the talk that goes on about, look, we don't have to wait till Sunday. We can do it right here and right now, that kind of thing. And that is just great backdrop for the business. That's great backdrop for the drama of professional wrestling, man. I mean, that's part of what makes wrestling great is that, again, that idea of two guys have a conflict, they need a resolution. The best way to get that resolution is to step into a wrestling ring like men and sell their differences like men with the whole world watching. To me, again, that's a concept that will never get old. And I've said before, as recently as episode number 38, actually, that I believe that pro wrestling should be as simple as possible. And when you boil it all down to its basic core, and its basic core is two guys have a problem with each other. They're going to sell their differences in the ring like men. That's what professional wrestling is. And anytime you try to dress it up, anytime you try to make it into something it's not, you try to take it and try to evolve it or devolve it into something else or something flashy. And you can do it to a certain extent, but eventually it's going to catch up to you because you have to keep it simple, stupid. The good old-fashioned KISS principles in full effect. All right, folks, so old school, the NWA, the National Wrestling Alliance, founded in 1948, 67 years. Is that crazy? I mean, for any of you out there who are maybe in your 60s or whatever, you were there possibly to watch the very beginning stages of the NWA. What a great time if you're a wrestling fan in your 60s and you're alive today, because, man, you saw the birth and the growth and popularity, the explosion of the NWA with Flair and the Horsemen, Dusty, the Road Warriors, Wahoo McDaniel, Ronnie Garvin, Magnum TA, the Midnight Express, the Rock and Roll Express. God, I could go on and on. And then you sadly saw its demise, of course, but the glory days of the NWA were just the best times, in my opinion, in the history of the business. I hear people talking about the Attitude Era was the best era of pro wrestling. Now, I can't deny that it was probably the best era of pro wrestling in terms of making money, in terms of profitability. Who can argue that fact? I mean, dude, there's a lot of money made during the Attitude Era for WCW, and later, and of course, ultimately for WWE. But in my opinion, the best days in terms of overall drama, storytelling, the impact the matches had on your everyday lives, on how they sucked you in and made you feel a part of the drama itself. The best workers. Dude, Jim Crockett had the best talent on the planet. I mean, where do you think Vince got his guys from? I mean, Vince didn't have training facilities at that time, man. Vince pulled all of his talent from the territory system. I mean, that's what it all came down to, man. I mean, it all came from the territory system. I mean, JYD, Ricky Steamboat, Roddy Piper, Greg the Hammer Valentine, Don Morocco, Adrian Adonis, who, by the way, Adrian Adonis used to wear black leather and was a tough guy. And he gets to WWF and he's, ambiguously questionable, his predilection to perhaps enjoying male company, if I can be polite about it. Flashy, bizarre, you know what I mean? Over the top. Now, all due respect to the late great Adrian Adonis. You do what you have to do to get paid, honestly, in the business. You do. Sometimes you love what you're given, sometimes you hate it. So all due respect. But the way in which Vince treated a lot of the top stars from the territory system, case in point, Dusty Rhodes, okay? And I alluded to that, in fact, on the last episode of the show here. I think was very telling. It was very telling in terms of what Vince's opinion was of those guys, and not of the guys personally, but of the companies they came from. Like he had a problem with Crockett, so he put Dusty in yellow polka dots. Is it really that simple? I mean, you would be surprised. I think maybe there was a lot of that going on, where Vince had the ability to put the NWA, one of their top guys, and their head booker, by the way, into polka dots was a way of thumbing his nose at Jim Crockett and saying, haha, see here? He's one of your top guys. Look what I did to him. Look what he's doing for me. He's dancing. He's dancing with a fan. All due respect to Sapphire. She was a fan. Okay, they pulled her out of the crowd and put her on tour with them. And I never understood that. She never fit, in my opinion. And I see guys now talking about she was a sympathetic figure and she was fun and she was real. She was a fan. All due respect. I didn't understand that then, and I don't understand it now. In an era when the business was so protected, for Vince McMahon and WWF to do a lot of the things that they did, where they let outsiders in, Mr. T in a match. And there had been guys and athletes from before that time who had stepped into the ring with pro wrestlers. Obviously, it had happened more than one time. Muhammad Ali had been referee before. I mean, the infamous match with Antonio Inoki. Apologies if I'm pronouncing that wrong. In Japan. By the way, wretched match. Save yourself some time and never watch it. It's horrible. Horrendous. But it was never met with great resounding results and appreciation, because the bulk of those matches were terrible. So it had happened before, but Vince really opened the door to pop culture because that's what he wanted, and he still wants to this day. That's why they can't have a pay-per-view without it being sponsored by a company, or it features a song by maybe a band you never even heard of. That's why every time they cut the commercial, they're playing the song. That's why they advertise a match, they're playing a song. I mean, that's why they have bands and rappers on pay-per-views. And it's this idea of, I have to make a crossover, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do this, I have to do that. And it works. I'm not disputing it works, but right now, they need more help than they have. And what would work, in my opinion, better than anything else, get back to basics. Keep it simple, stupid. Stop all the singing and dancing and get back to what pro wrestling is. And again, that's a disagreement between two men that settle like men. That's what it is, okay? But as we said before, the NWA founded in 1948. There was a lot of, let's say, regional pro wrestling promotions all across the country, all across North America. And each one had its own quote-unquote world champion. But none of them had the backing recognition outside their own respective areas. In other words, you could have Hickory Championship Wrestling. That's where I'm, neck of the woods down here, folks, in the Carolinas. But the Hickory World Champion. Well, the fans of that little tiny promotion that never left town considered it, I mean, just like ECW. ECW World Champion. Well, they never really left Philly and New York, did they? I mean, no, all due respect. But putting the word world in front of it gave it prestige. It gave it a lot of honor. Whether it was manufactured prestige and just a work or not, that's up to you to decide. But the world class championship. I mean, they've already got the word world in it. Easy for you to say, right? So that was already there. Nice little way to do that. WCW champion. You could call it WCW World Champion. Now, of course, that was a world promotion. I mean, absolutely. And, it all depends on your frame of reference. If you were a major diehard fan of ECW, you consider that title a world title. I never have, not one time, because I don't believe it was. But that's sort of what was happening in this country before the NWA, when the NWA was founded, was that you had a lot of guys claiming to be the world champion. But the concept of the NWA was to consolidate the championships of these regional companies into one true world title of pro wrestling. And this had to be agreed upon by every promoter involved, okay? And what it initially began, and you can find this stuff online, folks. I encourage you to look it up. There's some intriguing history of the NWA, which is what I'm doing right now, actually. And I'm probably going to write a column about this at some point. I've written a lot of old school stuff in the past 5 years, but never really an in-depth look on the NWA. But I think I might do that coming up. But basically, in 1948, Paul George, who was a promoter from the Midwest, founded the original version of the National Wrestling Alliance with the backing of 5 other guys: Al Haff, Tony Stretcher, Harry Light, Orville Brown, and Sam Muchnick. Now, if you're a longtime wrestling fans, you know Sam Muchnick's name, you know Orville Brown's name. They're very popular guys in the history of the business because Sam Muchnick was, of course, promoter from St. Louis. He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways, and he was sort of, I don't know what you could call it, maybe the guru at that time. He had a lot of great ideas, things that came into being later on because of his ability to sort of see down the road. I compared him a lot to Dusty in terms of being able to see past today and see tomorrow. Dusty had a great mind for the business, being able to market, as we said, talk people into the building long before the show ever got there, okay? Sell tickets months in advance just by cutting promos. And Sam had a lot of that in terms of, let's don't just talk about the show today. Let's talk about next month. Let's talk about, don't just tell me what the company's going to look like today. I want to know what's going to look like tomorrow. And so that made a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense today, too. It's a shame there's not more guys doing that, okay, honestly. But Sam was one of those guys. And it was, as we said, Orville Brown. He was a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion. And honestly, he was recognized as the first NWA World Heavyweight Champion in 1948. And yes, he was one of the guys that initially founded the NWA. Okay, they wanted Orville Brown to be the first ever NWA World Champion. Okay, now, who was the second? There's some trivia for you. Who was the second? Lou Thez. Huh? That's some good trivia, right? But here's what happened as the NWA formed, as they began to grow, as they began to draw fans and started to get over with every territory that they governed over, and the guys started getting bigger and better. What they did was the title, the major title, the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, was unified with other belts that, as we said before, that were called world titles, and they were jointly recognized by the NWA and the American Wrestling Alliance. You ever heard of that? Not many fans have. It was initially based out of Boston. This is what happened by unifying these titles into one belt. You suddenly have this group, this very young group in its infancy called the NWA. And suddenly people began to take it very, very seriously, very, very quickly, because by unifying all these belts into one title, you're giving legitimization that never happened before. It legitimized the title, okay? And into the eyes of fans, it made it the number one belt, which it was. And the company is still around today, not in the form that you knew it, probably, as Flair and the Horsemen and Dusty and Jim Crockett. Not quite that, but you know what? Hats off to the guys still carrying the NWA banner. It still exists. It's still out there. It had a revival of sorts, of course, in TNA when it was NWA TNA was the original title of that company, name of that company. They were affiliated directly with NWA. They sponsored and they featured the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Okay, and they had the original belt, the smaller belt, not the big gold belt that became basically Ric Flair's belt, but the one before it that was worn by Harley Race and Dusty and Rick, and Terry Funk, and I mean just any number of guys that were just amazing stuff during that time. And by the way, that NWA belt, that version of the NWA belt, remains one of my favorite titles. I just think it's a pretty title, just like the NWA United States Championship. The version that Magnum had that he dropped to Nikita, I thought the colors were perfect. The gold with the flag was amazing. But my favorite belt of all time was Arn Anderson's World Television title with the red leather. It was red leather and silver metal. Remember that? Oh my God, I love that belt. And I remember Flair cutting the promo talking about Dusty's, I think it was Dusty's United States, because a lot of the belts at that time were silver, unless it was a world title or world tag. It was a world belt, like world tag team titles, world title, whatever. But I remember Rick saying, "That's why your belt is silver and mine's gold, brother." Because it was just like, you know what? You might have a title. Good for you. I've got the title. And in my opinion, that's a lot of what's missing from the business today, is that recognizing the number one belt as the number one belt. It's not just a means to an end. You don't just put it on the main event because it's the world belt. You put it there because it should be there. You put it there because that's where it's supposed to be. You hold it up as a trophy that's extremely hard for a guy to win. You have to work your entire adult life to win it. You know what I mean? And it's extremely hard to win. And that's what the belt should be. That's how it should be portrayed. Okay? It isn't always that way, unfortunately, but it always should be. Okay, NWA World Champions. All right, the champ did not really have a home base of operations. All right, at that time, Flair did. I mean, it. All right, later on it did with Flair. Flair based himself out of Charlotte. Jim Crockett Promotions was in the Carolinas, so that's where you typically found Flair. But Flair, as NWA World Champion, traveled the world. He traveled everywhere: Hawaii, Japan, China. I mean, he went everywhere. He did. And he wrestled all across the globe, okay? And that was his job as NWA World Heavyweight Champion. The guys that came before him did the exact same thing. And that's what it was all about, was getting that belt out there. And Flair's job as World Heavyweight Champion, and this is a lost art as well, Flair's job as World Heavyweight Champion was to make the guy that he worked look good. Okay, that was his job. That's a pro wrestler's job, by the way, and we tend to forget that. But a pro wrestler's job is to make his opponent look as good as he possibly can, better than he could look with anyone else. And if you have two pro wrestlers with the same mindset, then you have suddenly a great pro wrestling match, which is what you had all the time during those days. Now, that's not to suggest that the jobbers, or the underneath guys, the ham and eggers as we used to call them, in other words, the bump boys of the old Saturday morning World Championship Wrestling on Superstation TBS, that's not to suggest that those guys were main event material. But I'm going to tell you right now, the main event material wouldn't have had spotlight that they had without those underneath guys doing the job every Saturday morning. That's the pro wrestling I grew up seeing. I grew up seeing the best guys in the world being spotlighted, being shown, being able to get in the ring and show off, being able to get into the ring and do their thing and get all their moves in and work the crowd and work their opponents as if it's the biggest main event they've ever seen, and to work the crowd into it, that little tiny crowd. Work that little tiny crowd into a lather, okay, of oh God. Every time a guy got a comeback on Ric Flair, the crowd lost its mind. Every time the Road Warriors came out, crowd lost its mind. It just went nuts. Same fans. If you go back and watch those old shows, which, by the way, now are thankfully on WWE Network, God bless Vince McMahon for that deal, man. Whoever's idea that was, God bless him. Because I love that stuff, man. I'll be honest with you, I can binge watch World Championship Wrestling programs from those days all day long, twice on Sunday. Because it's the best wrestling in the history of the business, in my opinion, man. I mean, the territory days, as I said before, some of the best you've ever seen. I mean, you had guys whose names have never really been matched, never really been echoed in terms of popularity, in terms of staying power, resiliency, stamina, in terms of ability in the ring, ability to get over, to sell tickets, to do everything possible to make for the best pro wrestling that you've ever seen in your life. And that was what was happening in the old days of the territories, and specifically NWA and Jim Crockett Promotions. But Ric Flair, his base, I guess you could say, was Jim Crockett Promotions, all right? But he traveled all over the world, and every time he went to a promotion, his goal was to make their top guy look as good as he possibly could. That was his goal, man. And he did it. He accomplished that goal every single time. Seriously, he accomplished it every single time. Because his job was to make that top guy look good. Why? Because when Flair left, that top guy still had to work the next week. Okay? So if Flair came in and crushed him, that would give Flair's ego a nice little boost and make him look like $1 million. But it wouldn't do much for that guy who still had to be the top draw in that little territory and still had to make money for that promoter. So if Flair or whoever was wearing the title at that time would come in and crush their top guy, that was bad for business. That was bad for business for everyone involved, because that promoter more than likely sat on the board of directors for the NWA or was closely tied to them. The next time around would say, you know what, keep your champ. You know what he did to me, man? You know what he did to my top guy? You know, in the 6 weeks since Flair was here, I've lost, $6,000, whatever it is. See what I'm saying? Because now no one believes in my top guy because Flair made him look like a chump. So Flair's job was to make him look incredibly good. Like that guy had an actual shot at beating Ric Flair and came within an eyelash of getting it done. And no one could do it like Flair could, man. By far. The best guys in the history of the business make their opponents look better than they ever could with anyone else, and did it with style, did it with class, and did it with flair. You knew that was coming, right? But that's what it was all about, and that's what it should be about today. Make your opponent look as good as he possibly can. That's the give and go of professional wrestling. I love the old school stuff, man. I always have, always will. That to me is old school mentality. That's what we need to get back to in a lot of ways right now. You're seeing some of that down at NXT right now with Dashwater and Dawson, new NXT Tag Team Champions. Dashwater, by the way, came up on the local independent scene. Wrestled for one of the guys he wrestled for was an old buddy of mine from the promotions I worked in. His name was Viper, and he worked for him, and he was a very good worker. And a lot of the Vipers guys were very good workers, but there was something about him. If I sit here and told you I saw him being in NXT eventually and having championship gold, that's a lie. Anybody that says, well, I saw Cactus Jack cut a promo one time for 2 minutes, I knew one day he'd be WWE champion. Stop it. You can sit there and tell me that you recognize his ability and, wow, this guy's got it. He's got the it factor. I get that. But I hear that a lot about not just Mick, but other guys. So I can't sit here and tell you that I saw, the first time he got up on the turnbuckle and I saw him say his name was Stephen the Fever Walters. I can't tell you I saw, well, there's a future NXT champion. No, but I can tell you for sure that I said, man, this guy's good in the ring. He seems to know what he's doing. It's fun to watch him. I would call some of his matches and had a pleasure doing it. But that they bring that old school tag team mentality. They keep comparing them to the Andersons. They keep comparing to the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Old school. Can't get much more old school than Ole and Iron Man. Or Ole and Gene, by the way, the original Minnesota Wrecking Crew. Okay? But they're bringing that old school mentality. It's alive and well. You just got to find it. You know what I mean? So those are the days. And I miss those days tremendously. And I think that we're getting a glimpse of it right now in NXT and in other parts of the world and other companies. So, I mean, it's definitely there. Like I say, you just got to kind of find it. But going back to the NWA, okay, usually every territory that was associated with the NWA, each territory had its own TV show. And that's how Flair would get showcased, okay? And it would probably be, you could probably only catch it in that particular town, in that particular state, in a handful of towns that would carry that channel or whatever, the local network or whatever it is, or the network affiliate. And that's what it was that you could watch that program, and everyone in your state would know that Ric Flair was coming to town. So you would obviously sell more tickets. You'd sell the place out. Your top guy, your top hand, whoever it was, Billy Jack Haynes, for example, Pacific Northwest. Every time NWA came to town, he was the guy. I mean, every time NWA traveled and went to world class championship wrestling, Kerry Von Erich, versus Ric Flair versus whoever in a certain territory, Ted DiBiase in Mid-South. I mean, it just depended on where you were and where they were going at the time. That Flair would go in, he'd wrestle 60 minutes with his eyes closed, have one of the best matches you've ever seen, and then he'd get the win in the end, whether by hook or by crook. He didn't always cheat. Heels are supposed to cheat. That was what actually number 38 was all about. So you know what I'm saying? So let's just think about that for a second. Okay, that heels are supposed to cheat, and Flair didn't always have to cheat, but he had, that's part and parcel of being a heel in professional wrestling, is taking every advantage known to man. I'm not going to get into it right now. Go listen to the last episode, dude. That's what you're here for, right? Go listen to my stuff. Jeez, this is old school, baby. That's what we're talking about here. But that's how Flair would be showcased, is on these local TV shows. That means that only the local fans would see the world champion when he came to their area, and not all year round. So that made the champion special. It made it a special event. That's how Heyman would talk about Brock Lesnar. Hard to do that without doing it the way Heyman does it, right? When Brock had the title and Heyman sort of defended him and the fact that Brock was never on TV. He said, look, when Brock is on TV, it's a special event. And that's how they portrayed it. That's how they tried to get him over as champ, was that, similarly to the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, when he came to town, it was an event. Like if you saw the champion every minute of every hour of every show of every week, eventually that belt, you're going to get tired looking at it. You're going to get tired looking at him. And it's not going to be that you don't respect him, that you don't appreciate him, that you don't even like the guy. That's not going to be it, even down to Seth Rollins. But eventually you're going to start putting that guy under the eye of a microscope, and eventually it's going to not be anymore, oh, dude, there's the champ. It's going to be, there's the champ. Which is what Heyman was trying to get over in defense of Brock Lesnar, which is what happened with the NWA. And here's the thing, if local fans of that era ever got tired of a guy, then that guy could go to a whole new area and perform his same routine, his same shtick for a brand new crowd. So that's why you had guys going from one territory to the next. So you'd have a guy in a territory, he's been there for a while, he's cooling off, okay? He's just not getting over anymore. It's just not working. Doesn't mean he's done anything wrong. It's just he's kind of lost the crowd. They're not popping for him like they used to, okay? So that guy gets a call, or he gives a call, or whoever comes to him, the promoter says, look, we're sending you to Tennessee. They've got it's red hot over there. We think you got a chance to get over. And that's how things worked in those days. And it was a smart system. It was good. It wasn't the best system for a lot of guys, obviously, because don't let me paint the old school picture as being perfect for everyone. It was great for the guys that could get over and were talented and could make it work. For some guys, it didn't work all the time, obviously. There's a lot of driving time in there, okay? There was a lot of, driving 100 miles and getting $100 if you were lucky, $50. Sleeping in seedy motels, sleeping in your car in a parking lot sometime, living hand to mouth to get from one show to the next, and trying not to be late. Now, when the Jim Crockett era happened, Jim Crockett Promotions, NWA, Ric Flair, especially during those days, a lot of guys in that company did make some money, and you didn't even have to necessarily be a main event guy to make some cash during those days. You had to be on the card with Flair. Be on the card with Flair, Dusty, and the Horsemen. And dude, you're gonna get a nice little payday that day. You should, as long as you showed up, you did your work, you kept your mouth shut, and played along and played ball, which is what a pro wrestler should do. I'm not saying you should always roll over and play dead. I'm not saying that, but at the same time, if you've got a job to do and you know what to do and how to do it, and you're confident, and the promoter, the boss, is confident in you, then get in there and do your work, man, and you'll get a little piece of the pie that night. That's what it was all about. You're just trying to get better, keep establishing your name, keep working hard to be the best talent you possibly can be. Because that way you can keep getting booked. That was a big deal. I got to keep getting booked. I need work. I need work past tonight, okay? Thanks for having me tonight. We popped the town pretty good, but I need to work tomorrow as well. I still got to earn money. A lot of these guys had families at home, and even if they didn't, they still need to eat. You know what I'm saying? So that was the old school way of life. I mean, there was no holding down part-time jobs because you were on the road. I mean, your entire livelihood was all based upon being able to draw, and that meant getting over in the ring, getting it done in the ring, making people want to see you, become an attraction, find your niche, get in the ring, and give the fans something that they can't see with anybody else. Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin is on my TV right now. Prime example. There had been a lot of guys with a lot of big ego, a lot of guys with a lot of flash, And this is actually from the days of the studio show on WTBS. It was Garvin and Blanchard tagging up. It was during the era of 1986 when they were running the United States Tag Team Title Tournament. And Blanchard's smiling the whole time. I mean, just obviously, he was just watching Jimmy strut around the ring. And it's just that idea that, that Jimmy has to be flamboyant. He has to have that flash. And Tully just gave a strut as well, by the way. That's awesome stuff, man. You have to be able to set yourself apart. It's the same kind of vibe that Tyler Breeze is trying to tap into now. And a lot of people love Tyler Breeze. I don't dislike the kid at all, but I will say he's a bit too Dolph Ziggler-ish for my own liking. And that's all due respect to Dolph. But I feel Tyler doesn't stand out enough because by this time, it's 2015, we've all already seen Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin. We saw a lot of guys before Jimmy and after Jimmy. No one's quite like Jimmy. Let's just be straight. I'm a Jimmy Garvin guy. I always have been, just so you know. But we've seen that type of gimmick before and after and since. And Tyler's doing the same thing. And is it working? Okay, it's what brought him to the dance. I get that. But this reputation of I'm cocky, I'm arrogant, I get the girls, but I'm a hard worker in the ring. You know how many guys in WWE have had that? Dolph has it right now, dude. And so I don't know if he's standing out, but you have to find a way to stand out. You have to find a way to make people in that crowd look at you and say, dude, I love this guy or I hate this guy. I either want to pay to see him win or I want to pay to see him get his butt kicked. That's what you have to have. And I mean, if you don't have that, you're never going to make it. You won't get booked in that town again. It's never going to work. And a lot of the old territory system, a lot of the ways they did business are alive and well today on the local independent scene. I mean, just no matter what town you're living in right now, get online and Google local pro wrestling for your town. And man, you're going to find some companies. You're going to find some promotions. Some are worth watching. Some are just flat out ridiculous. But a lot of those guys grew up on the territory system like yours truly did or are very familiar with it. And that's what they incorporate today. So a lot of the old things are still being used. They're still alive and well. I can tell you this, that the company I worked for when I got into business was very respectful of the old territory days because the promoter was very respectful of the territories. And he was a big Jim Crockett guy like I am. He had a lot of respect for the old days. He's just got, and I've got to have him on the show, because again, he's got a great mind for the business. He's one of those guys that could have sat in on WWE creative meetings on any given time, on any given day, and been able to contribute. And I'm dead serious about that. You hear people talk about that stuff, and it's immediately met with criticism and met with utter disgust a lot of times by fans who say, oh, come on. You don't know what you're talking about. You're just a fan. You couldn't book anything. You couldn't book a hotel, let alone a pro wrestling show, right? It's a good one. Feel free to use that. But this guy could, and because he's just that smart. I consider myself smart as well. Don't know if I could sit in with WWE Creative. I don't know if I got the chutzpah to do that. I probably don't have the talent to do that. But this guy I'm telling you about, he is one that could do that for sure. But when I first got in the business, that was who I worked for. And he just, very smart guy. He's very, basic, very nuts and bolts. Let's just go out there and have a good show. Had a good heart for it. I learned a lot of the things that I know today. I learned in pro wrestling, actually being in it myself. Things about the handshake. There's actually a secret handshake. Now, a lot of guys don't subscribe to it, but every guy that I was around always did it, with the exception of a handful. But the handshake, it's not limp, but it's not firm either. It's somewhere in between. A lot of guys would deliberately just place their hand into yours. And the reason that you did not give a stiff handshake was because it gave the impression you were going to stiff that guy in the ring. Because if you shake a guy's hand and he's got a grip that's a vice, well, guess what? He might be that hard in the ring, and I don't want to work that guy. I don't want to get killed tonight. You see what I'm saying? So there was a handshake involved. There was subtle things that I didn't know about. There was ran a spot one night with George South talking about the old school, talking about the NWA. George South was one of the underneath guys that worked quite a bit on Saturday mornings in that old studio on TBS. On TBS, excuse me, but. He was one of those guys, and George South we'd brought in several times. George South ran his own promotion, which was Exodus Championship Wrestling. I can't say for sure if it's still in operation. Google it and check it out if it is. But we ran a spot one night where it was he and I, and we had just had a spot with Ricky Morton from Rock and Roll Express was there with us that night, and he ran a spot with us, and George had cheated. He had the Mass Superstar number 2 with him. For a big guy, Duke could flat out work. I'm not even joking about that. But Ricky comes up, and we ran this spot, and I sort of, as the commissioner of the promotion there, I came out and gave Ricky a helping hand, and he ended up, winning the match. So George South confronts me after the match is over, and he takes off my hat and stomps on it and shoves me back in the corner, to which I immediately took my jacket off as if I was going to do something. And I said, you know what? I got a better idea. You're suspended next week, pal. And it popped the crowd all to pieces because George actually couldn't be at the show that next week. So we had to find a way to explain his absence, so it worked out. But I remember going to the locker room. I'd had very little interaction with George at that point, and I was the guy writing storylines for the company at that time. And so I went back and I shook his hand. I said, brother, you put me over. I really appreciate you doing that. He never looked me in the eye one time. He kept his head down. He's taken off his boots. He never looked me in the eye one time. He was not rude, but he wouldn't look at me. And that was one of the very first signs I got from a veteran that it was like, you know what? You're not worth my time. Now, I didn't get that from anyone else but him, and I don't know why I got it from him that night. Maybe it could be for some reason that I was never told, something that was never divulged to me, or maybe I just didn't get it. I don't know. But I'd met guys before and after George. We had the Barbarian in a few times. Barbarian, most down-to-earth guy you've ever seen. I've met Matt Hardy. Matt Hardy's awesome to be around. He's just a Carolina guy like myself. And just very normal, soft-spoken, just a very genuine person. Paul Jones, we had Paul Jones up. The Boogie Woogie Man, Jimmy Valiant. Bro, the first time I met Jimmy Valiant was in a Mexican restaurant. And he was laid back with his legs crossed. And he's just an old hippie. He's just an old hippie, man. He had the hair, had that tat across his forehead. I mean, years and years and years of just of ring wars and battles and all this stuff. And he was there, and I just, hanging out with Jimmy was one of the highlights of my time in the business. What a great guy. And he's still out there wrestling somewhere, I'm sure. Jimmy's he's got to be 80 by now. You know what I mean? But just that passion. And you talk about old school. We had the Rock and Roll Express. Ricky and Robert got in the ring and bumped like they were 20 years old again. Put on a match like you've never seen. And I swear it took me back in time. I had come full circle as a pro wrestling fan. Because again, I grew up watching the old school days. And a major fan during that era. And, for me to be a part of it and to be at ringside calling a match of the Rock and Roll Express. I'm smiling right now. It's insane. Calling a match of the Rock and Roll Express from ringside. That was by far one of the coolest times. What happened to that? Why did I grow up? Why did I choose to get older? That's ridiculous. I mean, oh my God, if I could turn back the clock, man, just to relive it one more night would be amazing. But that's the passion that the old school days brought out in fans. I mean, the Four Horsemen versus Dusty Rhodes, the Midnight Express versus the Rock and Roll Express, man. The Warlord and the Barbarian versus the Road Warriors. I mean, you had all these great rivalries. Magnum TA versus Nikita Koloff. Dude, I cried when Magnum TA was nearly killed in his car accident. I mean, I cried. I was a kid, and I bawled my eyes out. Because the first thing I heard was that he had died. You know what I mean? Because no internet in 1986. There was no way to know anything. It hit the TV, the local news, that a popular professional wrestler had been killed in an automobile accident. Magnum's name came up, and dude, I was in tears. When I found out that he wasn't dead, he was paralyzed, cried again. Because I thought, what a shame. This is one of my favorites. You know what I mean? Unfortunately for Jim Crockett, I don't believe they ever recovered from Magnum TA's accident. They had more invested in that guy than maybe you really even imagine, because it's no mystery that talks were had before Magnum's accident that, hey, you're the next guy. He was going to be the heir apparent to Ric Flair. Magnum knew it. Rick knew it. Jim Crockett knew it. Does that mean Rick was on his way out, by the way? Of course not. Don't be silly. Rick and Magnum probably would have traded the belt back and forth several times. And I think Magnum would eventually have made the jump to WWF, where there would have been no need for Hulk Hogan, because Magnum could actually work. Okay? Magnum maybe wasn't the best talker, but I'm going to tell you right now, when Magnum cut a promo and he was fired up, there's a difference between Hulk Hogan being fired up versus everyone else. Hogan had the gigantic eyes and this screaming with the hoarse voice, and it just didn't feel real. To this day, it doesn't feel real. It feels, for lack of a better word, and I hate this word, it felt scripted. It felt like the whole thing was rehearsed. It felt like it was all written down for him to say. It didn't feel genuine. It didn't feel like he was really upset about anything. But Magnum TA, fired up, dude, I mean, just passionate, just a passionate guy. Just, he seemed like that guy. He seemed like, to me, Magnum seemed like the star quarterback for the team that you could actually be best friends with because he had a good heart. He wasn't a jock in respect of, if you were beneath his class, he didn't speak to you. You actually wanted to see him do well in life because he was a good guy. And that's what Magnum was. And that's what he portrayed. That's what the sensibility that he brought to the whole shebang of the NWA. And I think that is really what we're talking about, is that charisma, that personality. And again, I don't believe that the NWA, specifically Jim Crockett Promotions, ever recovered from Magnum TA's accident because they had a lot going on. They had the future was right there in front of them. They had another top guy besides Dusty that could go toe to toe with Ric Flair, straight up. And what did all that mean for Jim Crockett Promotions? Well, it went downhill. They still maintained ratings. They still maintained ticket sales. I'm not saying it all went to pieces immediately, but what I am telling you is that they suffered tremendously from what happened during those days when Magnum went out with his accident. Very terrible time. Just bad time for them all the way around. And I look at those days of Magnum's accident as being really a turning point for Jim Crockett Promotions, because what was the next thing that happened after Magnum's accident? What happened? Nikita Koloff happened. The pop that shook the world, the face turn, the pop heard round the world when Nikita Koloff stepped into the cage with Dusty Rhodes against Ole Anderson and J.J. Dillon. You want to talk about an epic moment? If you have not seen that, you have to go look it up. It was by far one of the most amazing things I had seen to that point that I've seen since then. A crowd of thousands absolutely popped like you had never heard before because Nikita Koloff on that night turned face and joined arch rival, one of his arch rivals, Dusty Rhodes. You had the American Dream and the Russian Nightmare together, working together during the height of the Cold War. It was central casting at its finest. And what was Nikita's reason for turning? The accident of his biggest rival, his biggest competitor of all time, Magnum TA. So out of respect to his fallen foe, Nikita Koloff joins forces with Dusty Rhodes. So you no longer have America's team of Dusty and Magnum. You have the superpowers of Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff. To me, that was a turning point in that company. And you can say for good or bad it was a turning point. Some people want to call that a low point, not when it happened, but in the long run, because it changed the entire complexion of what was supposed to have happened. Nikita became a title contender. He was not a top guy in terms of winning the championship. Magnum would have been. So you had a potential, not a potential, but a certain top guy in the works who was, maybe 3 matches away from winning the big belt, okay? He's taken out forever. What do you do now? And I think that's one of the most dramatic events that's ever happened in the history of pro wrestling. And to me, again, a major turning point for the NWA. The aforementioned promoter that I told you about knew a lot of the inside stuff from those days because he knew some guys that worked for the NWA. So he had heard all kinds of stories over the years. And one of the things he told me one time was that because Crockett was in fear for his top talent, he started paying for limo service to and from the airport for his top guys. And that was one of the things. He had a private plane. That was one of the things that caused him to start going in the hole money-wise, start going bankrupt eventually, was that he was trying to take care of his top guys because Magnum's accident, it was a single-car accident by himself in his Porsche 911. And, he wiped out on a rain-slicked road by himself. And Crockett, in fear of his other main guys, his other top guys, started paying for limo service. That's one of the stories I was told. But that's one of the things that contributed to it. So again, if they had stayed extremely profitable with Magnum on the rise, I believe, you can laugh if you'd like to, I believe that company could probably still be in existence today. Jim Crockett Promotions right now would be run by the next generation. Like you would see, Vincent Mann is still there, but his daughter has stepped up. His son-in-law stepped up. I firmly believe that the accident of Madame TA completely turned things around in terms of, what happened. And I'll be honest with you, I look back during that time and I look at that and I say, man, what a shame. Because so much could have been done with Magnum as a top guy, but we'll just never know. We'll never know, man. It's a shame that it happened in the first place. Well, guess what's going to happen here, folks? We're going to stop this conversation right now. I know what you're saying. Dude, that you've not even scraped the surface of what old school is or was. What are you thinking, Tom? What's up? Well, guess what? This is only part one. You did read the title of the show, right? This is Old School Part 1. Well, now you know. Huh? So, guess what? We're not done. We're going to lead back with part 2. Easy for you to say, right? We're going to come back with part 2. So, I want you to do me a favor. When we get off here, I want you to go online, research Old School, look up the NWA, look up some Madam TA's matches, check that stuff out. And we come back with part 2 of this particular episode. We're going to get a little bit more in depth on Magnum. We're going to talk a little bit more about who he was, about who he could have been, and all that good stuff. His association with Dusty Rhodes that got him over to the moon. We're going to talk about a lot of stuff like that, and a lot more stuff on top of it. It's stuff, okay? That's all you need to know. It's old school stuff, and I'm the guy that's bringing you stuff. I'm the stuff bringer. That's my job, is to bring you stuff, okay? And it's good stuff as well, so come back for it. In the meantime, go check out my work. I beg of you. Bleacher Report, I'm there. I'm a featured columnist for WW Page. Check me out also on the highly esteemed Camel Clutch blog. Please go check me out there. You can find some of my work on Sportskeeda as well. Please go check out my own blog, tomclarkbr.wix.com/blog. And please give some attention to my latest project, the brand new production company that's been in the works for a long time, that's owned by myself and good friend Kyle Smith, called Boink Studios. We're on Facebook on Boink Studios. We're on Twitter. Please give us a follow at Boink Studios. Check out the website, tomclarkbr.wix.com/boink, where I've got a whole bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with pro wrestling, man, because Tom is he's fleshing this thing out, dude. I'm trying to be versatile. Follow me on Twitter at tomclarkbr. And drop me a line if you'd like to, tomclarkbr@yahoo.com. Wasn't that fun? That's part 1. Come back for part 2. Come back and check it out. In the meantime, thanks for everything, man. Thanks for listening. Thanks for doing what you do. Thanks for helping me be what I am in this business that we call pro wrestling journalism. That's what I like to call it anyway. Thanks again, man. We'll see you real soon. And please come back for part 2 of the episode that you just listened to real soon, okay, for Tom Clark's main event.